Hey folks, I'm going to do another model of the TLDAST for another poem that I really like called Cannibal Woman by Ada Limon. And I'm going to do it on paper because I much prefer to do it on paper. So we're going to set up our process. T for title, L for the literal information, so I know I'm going to need a beginning, middle, and ending summary. I gotta pick out some devices for diction and what they mean, so I know I usually have to do 3 of those really quick. I gotta analyze the tone or the attitude, any shifts that I see in structure or anything that changes suddenly, and then at the end I've got to have a theme statement. Alright, so let's think about this title, Cannibal Woman. I mean, I've already read this, I've already marked it up, but if I were to start fresh, I would be looking at that word cannibal and thinking, okay, this is probably about a woman who has had enough of the patriarchy, so she's fighting back. She's starting to bite people's heads off. Alright, let's see what's literally happening here. I'm going to do a first read. I'm looking for the right words, but all I can think of is parachute or ice water. There's nothing but this sailboat inside me, slowly trying to catch a wind. Maybe there's an old man on it, maybe a child. All I know is I'd like to go somewhere. They'd like to see the sails straighten, go tense, and take them someplace, but instead they wait. A little tender wave comes and leaves them right where they were all along. How did this happen? No wind I can conjure anymore. Okay, so at the beginning, she's literally saying like she's got a sailboat with no direction. And then it's stuck. Ever felt like you don't have any direction and then all of a sudden you feel stuck? It's like when you get to the stuck part, you'd rather just get back to the moving bit. Alright, let's see what's happening in the middle. My father told me the story of a woman larger than a mountain who crushed redwoods with her feet, who could swim. If you've ever seen a redwood tree, it's like a huge, huge tree. Who could swim a whole lake in 2 strokes. She ate human flesh and terrorized the people. I loved that story. She was bigger than any... Oops, got a Teams message. She was bigger than any monster or Bigfoot or Loch Ness creature, a woman who was like weather, as enormous as a storm. He'd tell me how she walked through the woods, each tree coming down, branch to sawdust, leaf to skeleton, each mountain pulverized to dust. Then they set a trap, a hole so deep she could not climb out of it. I have known that trap. Then people set her on fire with torches. Alright, so there's a shift. So she's in control, and then the town fights back. The monster's in control, and then the town is retaliating. So she could not eat them anymore, could not steal their children or ruin their trees. I liked this part too, the fire. I imagined how it burned her mouth, her skin, and how she tried to stand but couldn't. How it almost felt good to her, as if something was finally meeting her desire with desire. The part I didn't like was the end, how each ash that flew up in the night became a mosquito, how she is still all around us in the dark multiplied. I've wondered my whole life that my father told me this because she is my anger. First comes this hunger, then abyss, then fire, and then a nearly invisible fly made of ash goes on and on, eating mouthful after mouthful of those I love. So I know that this is all connected. She almost tells us to her anger. But let's pause and go back and do our middle and end summary. So in the middle, her dad tells the story of a monster, and then by the end, she reflects on the message of the story. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to what I would do in my second or third read. but I've already read this multiple times, so I can go back and do that. And obviously I've already marked up the passage to pick out some devices or details that I want to focus on. So let's see, I'm going to do one. You normally have to do 3 device or diction analyses, but I'm just going to do one as an example. And I think I'm going to talk about the monster just in general, because this monster is an extended metaphor that runs for multiple stanzas that we know that she's told us is already connected to her anger somehow. But I'm going to say a little bit more about that. So the monster is a metaphor for her, both her desire for control and the destruction of her anger, even if it is justified. She talks about the monster like breaking up later, like exploding into mosquitoes, which are, they don't have like, but the difference between a monster and mosquito in terms of damage is like damage is spread out and sort of everlasting, right? Because the mosquitoes just keep like breeding and swarming, everlasting because of the swarm of anger, rather than just like one focused big monster. So it's like if your anger spreads out, it's harder to control if you like keep it in one focused rage. So I think the difference here is that the monster is rage and the mosquito is sort of subtle daily anger. I think her dad is onto something here. Okay, so I ended up doing 2 here because I like went further into the mosquitoes as another metaphor. But her attitude definitely shifts from at the beginning feeling like hopeless about, what does it say? They were right there all along, about the ship being stuck. So she describes herself as a ship at first, and then later she has a monster. But when she is a sailboat, she's hopeless because she eventually, I'm going to use that quote. I just saw that. They wait, leaves them right where they were. So she's stuck and directionless as the boat. But then later, she doesn't sound angry, so her tone isn't angry, even though she's like kind of expressing about her anger. She sounds more excited, like she says, I loved that story about the monster. She says, I loved that story. So that's the difference here, is that her tone about the anger doesn't sound angry, so you're going to focus on how she sounds rather than how she's feeling. I loved that story because she's reflecting on it from the future. Alright, so the shift, one of the biggest shifts happens, and we noticed it earlier, the biggest shift happens when it says then. So like, then normally tells me something's been happening and then something changed. I've got a shift in events. So the shift goes from she is a monster with full control, and then, so I'm going to write in all caps, then, that's my signifying shift word. People fight back to regain control. So I've got these big words like control or power. Got big words like power, control, monster, and then we talked a lot about rage earlier. So really for my theme statement, I'm going to go back to my devices and kind of pull the overall meaning from here, because we were talking about the difference in the monster and the mosquitoes. And I'm thinking about the different kinds of anger here and how much it hurts the people around us, just like her dad was talking about at the end of the story, or what she was sort of pulling away. She has this quote here that says, what's even worse, or what like upsets her, is to think about herself as a mosquito that goes on and on, like we said, is everlasting. Taking in mouthfuls of those I love. So what I'm seeing is that like rage is understandable, because every human has a monster inside of them. We just have to kind of make friends with the monster. But when that shifts to subtle anger, or to let's say daily, and another word for anger, another tone word we learned we learned it last year, indignance, daily indignance. So, but when that like rage shifts to daily indignance, it slowly defeats the ones we love. Alrighty, that's my theme statement by the end. Notice my comma and my fanboy. And I've talked about my device here that I analyzed earlier. I talked about the shift. I talked about a tone a little bit with the daily indignance, except that her tone about the rage was more excited than it was about her like realizing that the anger was going on and slowly like spreading out. But here is your example. This is what it looks like on a sheet of paper, and you could easily do this in like a Word document of the TLDAST analysis. Hope this one was helpful. Have a good rest of your day.